Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking into something really fundamental, our DNA. Think about your genes not just as, a biological plan, but more like a living archive. It holds centuries of history, migration, culture, all blended together. And we're going to unpack the unique genetic story of Cuba. It's an island with just an incredible history, literally written in its genes.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Researchers often call Cuba's DNA this vibrant microcosm of the whole Atlantic world. It's really a place where all these different ancestries didn't just meet, they properly merged over hundreds of years. So our mission here is really to pull out the key insights from the latest research, help you understand what this unique genetic tapestry actually means.
And hopefully, what you'll get from this deep dive isn't just a list of facts. It's a better feel for how history, these huge human movements, and culture are, well, literally woven into our genetic code. We'll uncover some things that might genuinely surprise you, some real aha moments about how one island's DNA tells such a huge story. Okay, so let's paint the picture. You've got this island right at a historical crossroads. Its DNA carries echoes of the first people there, then the immense trauma and legacy of the transatlantic slave trade, and of course the waves of European colonialism. It's a complex mix.
It really is. And it shows how genetic history isn't static, it's always changing. Researchers often point to Cuba as just this perfect, vivid example. The history of the Atlantic world, kind of compressed into a single population's genome. It's not just a random mix, it's this unique identity formed over centuries.
So with that long history, where do we start? What's the earliest layer, genetically speaking, and how much of it can we still see today?
Good question. So before the Spanish arrived, Cuba was home to indigenous groups. You had the Taino, the Siboney Guanahatabey peoples. They were all part of the larger Arawakan language family. The original inhabitants. Now, if you look at the genetics today, studies show something like 4 to 10% of the average Cuban genome is indigenous. You see higher percentages in some areas, particularly rural eastern parts. But here's something really key. Mitochondrial DNA. That's the genetic material passed down mainly from mothers. And that shows much stronger indigenous continuity. It tells us that maternal lines, Taino women's lines, survived through the colonial period. Even with the terrible population collapse from disease and forced labor, it's a direct genetic thread back to the first Cubans.
Wow. So even through all that hardship, the persistence of those maternal lines is right there in the DNA. That's powerful. Okay, so moving from the first inhabitants, we get to what's probably the largest non-European influence on Cuba's genes, the profound impact of Africans brought forcibly during the slave trade, mainly between the 16th and 19th centuries.
Absolutely, a huge component. Estimates put it at around 35 to 45% of Cuban ancestry today being African. And this heritage mostly traces back to West and Central Africa. Think modern-day Nigeria, Angola, the Congo region, areas like that. And it's not just numbers, this African genetic heritage. It's left biological marks like the sickle cell trait. That's a genetic adaptation common in malaria-prone regions. It offered some protection historically. And of course, you see its deep influence on Cuban culture. The music is unmistakable. Afro-Cuban religions like Santeria, that mix of African traditions and Catholicism, and even the food, it's all deeply connected.
It's amazing how biology and culture are so intertwined there. So we have these strong indigenous and African roots. And then there's the major European layer, mostly from Spanish colonization, right? From places like Andalusia and the Canary Islands.
Exactly. That's the largest single component. Roughly 50 to 60% of the average Cuban genome is European. Primarily Spanish, yes. But, it's not only Spain. There are smaller traces, too, from France, Britain, other European groups that came through trade or migration or even conflicts over the centuries.
And incredibly, the story keeps going because later on, 19th, early 20th century, you get more subtle layers added. Immigration from China, Lebanon, even Jamaica.
That's right. It adds another layer of complexity. The Chinese-Cuban communities, for instance, they've left small but definitely detectable East Asian markers in the gene pool. It just keeps adding threads to this already unique genetic tapestry. Cuba really is like a living mosaic of world history.
So this incredible genetic mix, what makes Cuba so important for scientists globally? Why does this specific blend matter so much for research?
That's sort of the so what question for science, isn't it? Cuba's diversity makes it this incredibly valuable resource for medical and anthropological research. For example, certain hereditary conditions, Specific types of Parkinson's disease, for instance, show up at different rates in Cuba, and that seems linked to these unique combinations of ancestry. So researchers studying populations with mixed ancestry anywhere often look at Cuban genetics. It's a natural experiment almost. It helps them figure out how genes from different continents interact, things like disease resistance, how we metabolize food, even how people might respond to certain medications.
So it's not just about Cuba's past, it's actually helping us understand human health more broadly. That's fascinating. But I guess given Cuba's history and politics, this kind of research must come with some complexities, challenges.
Oh, absolutely. You're hitting on a really important aspect. It's scientifically valuable, yes, but it walks a fine line sometimes. You have critiques, for instance, from some Cuban scholars. They worry about foreign research projects, maybe taking genetic data out of the country, without necessarily ensuring the benefits flow back directly to Cuban healthcare or local researchers. That's a real concern. And then there's this internal discussion, too, within Cuba about how much weight to give the indigenous genetic heritage. It's a relatively small percentage overall, but historically significant. Is it overplayed, underplayed? It's debated in national identity narratives.
That makes total sense. The tension between the hard science and these deeply felt cultural stories. And I can imagine ancestry testing itself might be tricky territory there.
Exactly. Genetic ancestry testing can be, well, politically sensitive. Cuba's national identity has often emphasized unity, Cubanidad, rather than focusing on ethnic or ancestral splits. So it brings up this bigger question, really. How do you balance that drive for scientific knowledge with cultural sensitivity, especially around identity? It's not always straightforward.
And it's that very complexity, that internal variation, that leads to a really surprising fact, doesn't it? Something that shows just how diverse Cuba is within its own borders.
This is quite striking, actually. Studies have shown that if you take two Cubans from different parts of the island, let's say,
Yeah.
someone from Havana and someone from Santiago de Cuba,
Hmm.
the difference in their balance of African versus European ancestry might actually be greater than the average difference between a Brazilian and a Puerto Rican.
Wow, really? Greater than between a Brazilian and a Puerto Rican.
Yes, it really highlights the incredible internal genetic variation on the island. So the idea of a single, uniform Cuban genetic profile, it doesn't quite hold up, which again opens up interesting paths for more localized medical research and understanding regional histories better. So when you boil it down, what scientists are finding is that Cuba's DNA really does act like a living archive. It carries the histories of 3 continents all woven together in this intricate way right there in the genome.
And maybe the final thought for you listening is this. How can genetic research in a place like Cuba move forward? Can it genuinely boost public health and understanding without falling into old, potentially exploitative patterns? Or maybe think about it this way. Should Cuba's genetic heritage be framed as one single national story? Or is it more accurate, maybe more useful, to see it as multiple distinct ancestral legacies, each with its own variations and meanings?
It's clear the Cuba gene, as it were, is much more than just science. Its identity, its history, its culture, all tangled up in the code of life itself.